Well, thanks for joining us, everyone. My name's Jasper from SCORE, Maine. I'm joined by Tom Kittredge of the Maine Technology Institute here to talk about MTI's grants and programs for your business. MTI is a very much valued partner of us here at SCORE, and we appreciate everything they do. If you're not familiar with us here at SCORE, if this is your first time joining one of our workshops, we're a nonprofit partner of the Small Business Administration. We offer free services such as this, as well as one-on-one mentoring. And we look forward to your questions as they arise. If you have a question, feel free to throw it in the chat and we can address it, or utilize the raise hand function at the bottom of your screen in the React window, and we can have you come off of mute. Otherwise, Tom, why don't you take it away?
Yeah, thank you, Jasper, and good to see so many folks here today. I do this presentation every couple of months, and always it's a great conversation. MTI is really pleased to be a partner with SCORE. We work very closely with them. They provide incredible services for a lot of the companies in our portfolio company. So yeah, just grateful for the opportunity and looking forward to this presentation. Typically, it takes around 20 to 30 minutes, I would say. So after that, there'll be plenty of time for Q&A. So happy to take any questions. And I should emphasize, I see a few familiar faces here, which is amazing. This presentation is specifically going to be on MTI's core business services, so our business innovation funding and our Maine Entrepreneurial Resource Corps program. Folks might have heard that we are also doing an R&D bond program, MTAF 3.0. I won't really be going into that too much today. I can give a very high level overview, but we are having Zoom presentations on that program. And if you're interested in that program, you can find the links to those Zooms on the web page for it. But yeah, I'm going to go ahead and kick us off. So for folks who might not be aware, MTI, Maine Technology Institute, we are a nonprofit primarily supported by the state of Maine, whose mission is really to support innovation in Maine as a means to economic development and growth. So the hope really being that by providing resources to businesses in Maine, innovators in Maine, and allowing them to scale their innovation, that in turn will create economic development in the state of Maine. So that's really kind of the core of what we're seeking to do, is use innovation as a means to create economic development here in the state of Maine. So just a little bit about the history of MTI. So we were founded in the late 90s. At the time, Maine was lagging behind a lot of the rest of the nation when it came to investing in research and development in the state. So we were created in the late 90s to address that issue. Since then, we have served over, in 2011, it was 1,000 projects. I'm sure we're over 2,000 now. We've put over $300 million into Maine-based organizations engaged in innovation. So we've had the opportunity to work with hundreds and hundreds of Maine businesses who have gone on to be successful, which has been really exciting and rewarding as an organization. So this slide really just gets at the idea that MTI works with a wide array of businesses and a wide array of businesses at different stages of their growth. So we work with businesses that are extremely early stage, who have an idea, hopefully have done some degree of validation of the idea, but might not even have a prototype or a minimum viable product yet, all the way up to businesses that have been in the market for decades, who are generating, millions of dollars of revenue, who have lots of employees, but maybe have a new idea that they're looking to scale, or maybe are looking for additional support to grow an innovation. So yeah, this is really just kind of capturing the idea that we work with businesses at different stages, and that we provide tailored support to them depending on what stage they're at. So this is just an overview of the different sorts of programs that MTI offers. For today, I'm primarily going to focus on this very top one, the Business Innovation Funding, which is really our core program. It's the program that we offer, that we've offered since our inception, and it's really intended to help businesses in Maine who have an innovation get access to funding and begin to grow that innovation, hopefully commercialize, and hopefully start scaling in the state of Maine. So through Business Innovation Funding Program, we offer grants. And then once a company maxes out its grant funding, we also offer loan and equity funding as well. So I'm going to go into way more depth into this program. So that's all I'll say about that for now. The Maine Entrepreneurial Resource Corps program, the second one, that is a program that we started about 3 years ago. And really what is intended to do is help Maine-based businesses who have a consulting need a short-term project where specifically they're looking to hire a consultant, we're able to help them get linked with a consultant because we maintain a database of consultants in the state of Maine. And then we're also able to help them pay for hiring that consultant. So I believe it's up to $20,000 of support with an expectation of matching funds. So, projects that people utilize Merck for include anything from hiring a engineer, or hiring a sales and marketing expert, or hiring an HR consultant, or hiring an IP lawyer. But it really has to be specific projects that require a consultant. And generally, we're expecting the consultant to be Maine-based. They have to be registered in our database. Once in a very rare while, if somebody needs to hire a consultant and they can't find that particular area of expertise at all in the state of Maine, we might be able to help them hire somebody outside of Maine, but that's very rare because generally we can find the consulting expertise here in the state. Event sponsorship. So that's basically just the idea that MTI provides funding to support events in the ecosystem that celebrate entrepreneurship. Those sorts of events can be anything from things like Startup Maine, for those who are familiar with that, to various SCORE events that they run, the Top Gun program through the Maine Center for Entrepreneurs, Greenlight Maine, which is a TV program that celebrates entrepreneurship, Upstart Maine's programming. So a variety of different events in the state of Maine that celebrate, champion, and educate our innovation economy. Federal funding technical assistance program. So the federal government has, I think, roughly 16 or 17 different agencies that have programs within them, generally through something called SBIR and STTR. So I forget exactly what those stand for, but something along the lines of like Small Business Innovation Research and Tech Transfers, the TTR. But really what those are programs nestled within different federal agencies to support companies that are aligned with the goals of those federal agencies conduct research and development. So the Department of Agriculture has programs that are specifically targeted at businesses that are doing things in the agricultural space that are high risk, research and development intensive, that might be a fit with some of the priorities of that agency. MTI doesn't administer any funding through this program, but what we do is we provide expert assistance for people to apply for those programs. So we'll help you figure out whether or not you're likely to be eligible to apply for SBIR and STTR funding. And then if we think you are likely to be a good fit, then we can help you prepare your application. We won't actually write it for you, but we'll give you very high level feedback. The folks who are in that program have been doing it each 20 odd years, extremely experienced. So we've found that people who utilize the program are much more successful when applying for these two programs. And you can find out more about both these programs and what sort of funding is available on our website. Entrepreneurial Support Organization funding. So that's a new program that we've launched that's specifically for mostly nonprofits in the state of Maine who have missions that are aligned with MTI's own. So again, an organization like SCORE, who need support of their own to grow their programming, they could apply for Entrepreneurial Support Organization funding. But again, those aren't really for businesses. They're more for organizations that are themselves offering program to entrepreneurs. And then lastly, additional programs. So on occasion, we run one-off programs. So at the start, I mentioned that MTAF program, Maine Technology Asset Fund, which is being funded through the R&D bond that voters passed back in November. It's $25 million. MTI is in the midst of administering that fund. It's for businesses who have capital needs and can show they're looking to grow their business and create economic impact. Like I said, I'm not going to go into that one too much today, but there are a number of Zoom sessions you can find on our website where we go in depth as to what that program is and what the criteria is and how much you can apply for. I believe we have 4 more Zoom sessions over the next month or so. The deadline to apply for that program is mid-November. So people I'd highly recommend if you're interested in applying for that. Again, it's different than business innovation funding because it's specifically focused on people who need to make capital investments, so building, land, infrastructure, which isn't really the purpose of business innovation funding, which again, I'll go into right now. So business innovation funding. So again, these are the sorts of funding that are available are grants, loans, and equity investments. Typically, when a business comes to MTI for the first time, they generally want to tap into grant funding, which is great for the business because there's repay it. They're not diluting their ownership. Um, it's good for MTI because it's a good way to build a relationship with a business before we move on to another form of funding. The reason we offer loans and equity investments is that we have a cumulative grant cap limit of 100,000 per business. So sometimes businesses max out that grant funding, but are still in need of additional funding to keep scaling. And so we can talk to them about loans and equity investments. But I'm going to go into that in a moment. So key requirements. So this is what we really refer to internally as fit to MTI. So these are the kind of high level requirements we're looking to see a business can demonstrate before really exploring any sort of MTI funding or support, particularly through business innovation funding. So economic impact potential, which is basically, are you a business that's seeking to grow in Maine and create economic impact? Innovative and forward thinking. So do you have an innovation? Is it really substantially differentiated and positioning you to have some sort of competitive advantage in the market that's going to enable you to grow? Maine-based, we're funded through the state of Maine, so you need to demonstrate you're a Maine-based organization. 7 targeted technology sectors. So when we were created, we were tasked with supporting 7 sectors, and then access to matching funds. And I breezed over those because I'm about to go into each of those in a little more depth. So economic impact potential. So really what MTI is looking to see are businesses that are looking to grow here in the state of Maine. So if you are a 1-person business or a 2-person business and you're totally content staying at 1 or 2 people, that's fine. That might be a totally viable business, but since you're not looking to grow, you're probably not a great fit for MTI. We're looking really to support businesses that are seeking to grow and create additional impact in the state. And what sort of metrics we look at. So probably the key one is the creation of quality jobs in the state of Maine. And you have to put forth kind of a credible demonstration that you are going to be creating jobs in the state of Maine. So we're looking to understand, how are you going to create those jobs? What resources are you going to need? Where are you going to create them? But definitely the creation of quality jobs is one of the key metrics we look at. But we do try to take a holistic look at economic impact and recognize that not all economic impact is just through the creation of quality jobs. And quality, I'm saying, so we're not necessarily looking to see a business that's going to create a ton of minimum wage jobs. We really want to see jobs that are, well paying enough that they're living wage and create that economic impact through having a decent salary. But other things we look at are growth and acceleration of revenues. So are you anticipating that you're going to grow your sales, and that in turn, means tax revenues for the states and other sorts of positive implications? Are you positioned to have an investment round where you'll be bringing additional capital into the state, or are you fundraising outside of the state of Maine in some other ways? Are you selling outside of the state of Maine and bringing revenue into Maine from elsewhere in the world? Are you going to build a facility here in Maine? And then also indirect economic impact. So are you working with a Maine-based supply chain? Are your customers based in Maine? Do you have partnerships in Maine with other businesses? Is your innovation something that's going to benefit other members of your sector in Maine? So we take a really holistic look when we're assessing economic impact. There's not a hard and fast metric we're looking at, but again, you have to put forth a compelling case that you're going to create economic impact here in the state of Maine. Maine-based organizations. So there's a couple things we're looking to see here. So one, this top bullet, registered Maine business. What that means is any entity that receives funding through MTI has to be registered with the state of Maine's Bureau of Corporations. So the Secretary of State of Maine maintains a database through the Bureau of Corporations where it basically notes whether or not a business has filed all their necessary paperwork to be in good standing with the state. And you basically just need to demonstrate that you're in good standing. To clarify, because this is often a point of confusion for some folks, that doesn't mean you have to be incorporated in Maine. So for example, we work with a lot of companies that are incorporated in Delaware because that's a very popular place to get incorporated. That's fine. You just need to have basically filed your paperwork with Maine, which allows you to do business here. So that's just a requirement. You don't have to have completed that at the time you apply for MTI funding, but you do have to have completed that before you actually receive any MTI funding. So sometimes what happens is people apply for MTI funding and simultaneously they're in the process of getting registered with the state of Maine because that process can take a few weeks. And then the second point is the other really essential piece, which is predominantly Maine-based. And the reason we use the word predominantly is particularly in today's day and age, lots of people have remote workers, maybe are working with, a co-founder who's not based in Maine. But we really need to determine that the state is more based in Maine than it is anywhere else. So key things we look at are where are the key decision makers based. So you can think of those as either the founders or C-suite level employees. Are they based in Maine? If so, are they all based in Maine? How many of them are based in Maine? Um, are there physical headquarters that are going to be based in the state, physical infrastructure? How many employees will be based in Maine versus in other parts of the world? Do you publicly identify as being a Maine-based company? Is it on your website? There's a number of different factors we look into, but the most relevant to are, where are the key decision makers based, and then also what's the proportion of employees in Maine versus in other parts of the world. This last bullet just notes that occasionally we'll have companies from outside of Maine who are interested in relocating to Maine, apply for MTI funding, and we allow them to apply. But before they actually get the funding, even if they're approved, they have to demonstrate that they've fully relocated. And that's just a kind of business attraction tool we have. So we can let people know, you know what, you might be able to tap into MTI funding, but you have to demonstrate you've actually relocated here. Innovation. So this is probably the area that I get the most questions often on these webinars, because people are often like, I don't know whether or not what I'm doing is innovative. Innovation can be, it's very contextual. It's very based on the sector. It's very based on the stage of the business, a variety of different factors. But the things we're really looking to see is that you're able to demonstrate that you're doing something that's substantially differentiated from what's already out there on the market. And that provides you with some sort of competitive advantage, which in turn is going to allow you to grow your business. So really, we're looking to understand how is what you're doing that's innovative, positioning your business to grow. So that can be through a few different ways. That can be that your product or service itself is innovative. So you have a product that's novel, that's distinct, and there's a market demand for it, and you've kind of spoken to your target customers, and they're excited about what you're offering. Another option is, what you're selling isn't itself innovative, but the way you're creating it is innovative. So you have an innovative manufacturing technique, for example, and the end product, not very innovative, but the way you're getting to it is innovative, and that allows you to sell it cheaper, or at a higher quality or something. But again, ultimately, they're working to understand how are you able to offer a better product to your customers that they're willing to pay for, that in turn is going to position you to grow your company. So some of the things we like you to show to demonstrate it's actually innovative is, have you conducted customer discovery? So have you talking to prospective customers to get their feedback on the product, on the service, on the price point you're proposing, on, what, are they actually willing to switch to you versus, whatever service they're getting? Market research. So, beyond customer discovery, have you done research to the size of the market, what trends are, what the growth rate is, what sort of demands are out there? Review of existing IP. So, have you done research into existing patents and other things to demonstrate that you're not going to be blocked? You're not going to try to launch something and it turns out somebody has a patent on it. And then competitive landscape analysis. So, do you understand who the competition is? And can you demonstrate how you're differentiated from what your competition is doing? And again, I'm happy to take questions on innovation when we get to the Q&A. I may say, because this is often what I end up saying is, actually, I think I need more information than I can get right now in this webinar. Why don't we, talk, or why don't I connect you to one of my colleagues? But I'll do my best to answer when we get to the Q&A section if I can briefly. 7 targeted technology sectors. So these are the 7 sectors that MTI was tasked with supporting when we were created in 1999. And the reason we were tasked with these 7 sectors is the legislature at the time perceived that these were going to be the key sectors for Maine moving forward, in terms of growing our economy in the 21st century. I won't read them all off. You can see them here. One of the nice things is that when the legislature tasked us with supporting these 7 sectors, they weren't overly prescriptive as to what those sectors meant. And that's nice for a couple of reasons. One is it means we can be really broad in how we define those to try to capture as many Maine-based companies as possible. And the other is that these sectors have all evolved substantially since 1999. When you look at information technology and where we stood with things like AI or machine learning or automation at that point versus where we are now, things have changed dramatically. So it's nice that we have that flexibility when it comes to defining those sectors. One other thing I should note is, so in terms of being a fit to sector, so you will need to demonstrate you're a fit to these sectors, but you either need to demonstrate that your business itself is within one of these sectors or that your innovation is in one of these sectors. So an example I use is a business in hospitality, which is not one of the defined sectors. But if they have an innovation that, let's say, is an innovative platform that's going to enable them to provide a much higher experience to their customers through this platform, and maybe it utilizes AI, and maybe it really sets them apart from their competition in a way that's going to allow them to grow the business, that might be a fit to sector because the innovation is within one of the sectors, even if the organization itself is not. So that's some of the flexibility we're able to offer when it comes to sectors. And then lastly, access to matching funds. And this requirement, most of these requirements are true to most MTI programs, and this one certainly is, which is when we are created, another part of our statute with the state of Maine is that any MTI funding needs to have matching funds attached to it. So you can think of matching funds as kind of cost share. So generally what MTI is looking to do is support a project. So we're basically looking for an applicant to come forward to us and say, hey, I have a project in mind that's going to help me move my innovation forward. And matching funds basically means that you're going to pay for half of the project you're proposing to MTI. So, if you come to MTI and you say, hey, I have a $50,000 project in mind, I need support for it, MTI could put in up to 25,000, assuming you meet all the other requirements, with the expectation that you pay for the other half of the project that you're proposing, so the other $25,000. Now, well, actually, just a couple of notes. So on in terms of what can be used as match. So really, again, the way we're thinking about it is we want you to demonstrate that you're going to be able to pay for the other half of this project. So we're fairly flexible as to how you pay for it. It could be that if you're the founder, it might be your own personal funds. It might be funds from other founders. It might be investor funding. It might be that you've got a bank loan, a line of credit, a credit card. It might be that you've won other grants. We're fairly agnostic as to how you pay for the project, as long as you can demonstrate you have access to matching funds to pay for it. So that's one thing to note. The only exception to that is it can't be other state of Maine taxpayer money. Because we're funded through Maine taxpayers, we don't want people to kind of match it with Maine taxpayer money. So what that would mean is there aren't that many examples of that, but the Maine Venture Fund is our sister organization. They're also funded through the state of Maine. So if you got an investment from them, you couldn't use that as match for us. And then also MTI puts out funds for some of the competitions that are out there in the state of Maine for entrepreneurs. So for example, Top Gun has a prize at the end of the program that's historically been funded through MTI. Greenlight Maine is another example. So those funds typically, if they're basically MTI funding originally, can't be used to match MTI requests. But again, those are very uncommon exceptions. And then sweat equity. So you'll see here in this second half of the slide, it talks on sweat equity. So that's basically the idea that particularly for early stage companies, where maybe the founders aren't drawing a salary, that we want to recognize all of the work that they're doing on the project, if they're being not compensated for it. And so we're able to basically accept a portion of the match for an MTI request as the value of the unpaid labor of the founders. So for example, if you're coming to MTI and you're saying, hey, can I have $25,000, and you're going to be working 100 hours on this project, not compensated in any way, and it's, if you weren't doing the work, you'd have to pay somebody to do that work. We can basically take the value that you'd be paying somebody to do the work that you're doing for free, and use that as part of the match. Now, the larger the MTI request, the smaller the percentage of sweat equity that we can accept is. So you can see down here at the very bottom, you'll see there's kind of 4 different asterisks. So for cumulative MTI funding between 0 to 15,000, cash match should be at least 50%. So that means we're looking to see at least 50% of the MTI amount requested as cash. So to make it simple, let's say you're requesting 10,000 from MTI. We're looking to see at least 5,000 cash, and then the other 5,000 could be sweat equity. And then you can see as it scales up, we're looking to see a higher and higher percentage of cash match. So by the time you're requesting at least 50,000 from MTI, we're looking to see at least 100% cash match. So if you request 50,000, we're looking to see you have 50,000 in cash to pay the other half. So again, the sweat equity option is really more intended for early stage companies, whereas the later, larger amounts, we're looking to see that cash match. MTI funding scales with you. So this is really the idea that MTI's goal or vision is that for successful companies that are scaling and are successfully achieving their MTI projects, we don't want to be kind of a one and done sort of operation. We really want to be able to help continue supporting companies as they scale. And we have different kind of buckets of funding that are available based on how far along a business is. So you can see these kind of ranges over to your right. So our first bucket of funding is $0 to $30,000. We internally refer to that as range 1. The next bucket is 30 to 100,000. We internally refer to that as range 2. And then you can see this bright red line that kind of runs across the graph. That's to kind of demonstrate that $100,000 cumulative grant cap limit that I mentioned. So once a company has received $100,000 in grant funding from MTI through business innovation funding, we are no longer able to offer grant funding through that program, but we are occasionally able to do loans and equity, which is kind of above 100,000. I should emphasize that this grant cap limit is specifically for the business innovation funding program. So you are able to apply for things like the Maine Entrepreneurial Resource Corps and get grant money through them, even if you've maxed out your grant funding through business innovation funding. The same goes with applying for some of those one-off programs that we run, things like the MTAF program that I mentioned. Those aren't affected by this limit. This limit is specifically for business innovation funding. But again, yeah, really the idea is that, companies can come back to MTI multiple times and kind of build on the projects that they've received support from for us and kind of over time, hopefully as the business is growing and scaling and hitting key milestones, tap into additional MTI funding. So again, a common occurrence would be that a company comes to us for the first time, they get $25,000, $30,000 in funding to, execute a project. Maybe that's getting to a minimum viable product. Maybe that's, doing some other groundwork, hopefully achieve that project and then come back for follow-on funding. Maybe they go for another 20 or 30,000, achieve that, and then kind of come back. I'd say it's pretty rare for us to put out $100,000 all at once as a single grant, which much more common is for us to do small grant awards, look for you as a business to demonstrate that you're growing, that you're hitting key milestones, and then be eligible for additional follow-on funding as you go. And then just briefly on these columns here, you can see these are kind of the key areas that we look at to understand where a business is in its growth. And we want to see kind of demonstrations that you're growing in each of these areas to be eligible to tap into additional MTI funding. And I should also mention, Jasper, you're going to send out this slide deck afterwards, I assume. So people have access. Hopefully people are taking notes, but also if you're not, that's fine because we're going to send out this deck.
Yeah, it gets sent out to anyone who's registered. So as long as you're here, or if you happen to be heading out early, don't worry. Today's recording and slides will be sent out once available.
Great, awesome. So in terms of the process, if you're like, yeah, this seems interesting to me, I'd be interested in figure out next steps. So we recently, about 3-4 weeks ago, launched a self-assessment test on our website where you can go in and basically self-assess whether or not you're likely to be a good fit for MTI. So if you are, if you self-assess as being a good fit, it doesn't mean you definitely are. All it means is you self-assessed as likely being a good fit. But that's a good sign, and it means it probably makes sense for you to reach out and connect with somebody at MTI. So at the end of that test, there's an option to basically request to speak to somebody at MTI. If you don't self-assess as a good fit for some reason, This test will tell you why you did it. So it'll be like, okay, here are the reasons you seem like maybe you're not a fit at this moment in time. And then also tell you, here are some specific resources where you can address your shortcomings or the areas where you need to improve before coming to MTI. And I have a couple slides later on that kind of show how the self-assessment test works. So I'll show those in a moment. But basically, if you self-assess as a good candidate, or even if you don't, but you just want to speak to somebody at MTI anyway, you can submit an interest form either directly from the test itself, or if you go on our website, there's a link to submit an interest form. And that basically creates a notification internally for us saying, hey, there's somebody who wants to speak to one of you about, MTI support. And then so we'll reach out, we'll schedule a call with you, and we'll help kind of talk through your business, your innovation, what sort of project you had in mind, and help you determine whether or not you're likely to be eligible for some sort of MTI support, and if so, how much. And then, if we do think you're a good fit, which is kind of what invited to apply means, we will provide you with the template documents that you need to submit a request to MTI for business innovation funding. And what those documents are scope of work, which is basically what is the project you're seeking support on? What are the activities? Are there quantifiable deliverables linked with each of those activities? And what's the timeline for each of those activities? So really what we're looking to see with this document is the project clear? And is there a way for us to measure whether or not you were successful at the end of the project? So by deliverables, we're really looking to see things that are quantifiable, that aren't vague, and that let us say at the end of the project, check, 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 these were achieved, or no, they weren't achieved. In which case, we'll work with you to figure out why and plan next steps. Budget, that's an Excel document. Just asks you to describe what are the expenses associated with the project. And then how much are you asking for from MTI? And then what are your matching funds and what are the sources of those? And within the budget, we have predefined categories where you can kind of categorize different expenses and then describe what they are in the note section. And then the application document, which is a Word document, it has 5 sections: economic impact, team, innovation, market, and business model. And it just asks you to answer a series of questions in each of those areas, kind of demonstrating where you are as a business. And then MTI funding decisions typically take around 2 months. The way it works is it's first come, first serve when it comes to applying for MTI funding. So we don't have deadlines. It's just you can apply whenever you want. But how long it takes to get an answer is based on what's ahead of you in the pipeline, because basically our team is reviewing it, and then once they finish an application, they'll move on to the next one. So that's why generally it's around 2 months, but it's kind of dependent on what's ahead of you in the pipeline. Something to note is you are welcome to get started on your MTI project while it's in review. So, if you are planning to submit an application in September and you want to start the project in September, but, the application probably won't have an answer till November, that's okay. You can start spending the matching funds at the start of the project. I just wouldn't start any project that is so dependent on MTI funding that if you don't receive the funding, then you're going to be in trouble. But if it's something you're planning to do either way, or if you're planning to do a portion of the project either way, then you can get started while your application is under review. And then if approved, ongoing reporting requirements. So, we have an expectation that we hear how the project goes. For grant funding, all that entails typically is a final report at the end of the project where you document how the project went, and then how much you spend, and kind of confirm you spent all the match and the MTI funds and so on. For loans and equity investments, we have some other additional requirements, quarterly reporting and things of that nature. But for grants, typically it's just a final report. Sometimes we'll make a grant award where we'll basically we say tranche it. So we'll break it up into multiple payments. We'll say, yeah, you can have 20,000 now, and then you have to hit certain milestones to get the other 20,000, in which case we might have some additional reporting requirements to access the rest of the funds. So when is a good time to contact MTI? So, what are the things you basically should have answers to before speaking to an MTI representative? So these are the things you're going to want to be able to speak to. So the problem, so basically why is your innovation matter? What are you seeking to address as a problem? So that could be a problem your customers have, and you have a solution to it. or it could be an internal problem, so a manufacturing inefficiency, for example. But you want to demonstrate there's a real problem you're addressing that's sizable enough that it needs to be addressed and it'll position your business to grow, and point to supporting evidence. Again, that's that third bullet. The customer discovery is one of the key points of supporting evidence we look to see. Again, market research, review of IP, all those things I mentioned earlier on. Innovation and how it's differentiated from existing options. So again, we're looking to see things that are substantially differentiated to the extent that it's going to give you some sort of competitive advantage in the market. Customer discovery, I've already touched on that. Team with complementary skill sets. So this is a good one to speak to. So MTI loves to see teams that have multiple team members. That doesn't necessarily mean that it has to be a multiple founder team per se, but we're looking to see that there are multiple people involved in bringing the project to fruition and making it successful. So that can mean that it's a multiple founding team. It could also mean it's a sole founder, so just one founder, but they have a really strong group of business advisors and mentors. So for example, SCORE mentors are an incredible resource. They have employees, they have consultants or contractors, but really demonstrating that there's multiple people involved in the project who are invested in its success and who are going to help kind of complement the other team members and make it a really robust team that's positioning the project to be successful. I've already touched upon competitive landscape and market opportunity, but I'll mention for competitive landscape, market opportunity, customer discovery, those are all great things to use a SCORE mentor for. They're all very well equipped to help early stage founders conduct some of these activities, which can sound intimidating if you're new to starting a business. So we definitely recommend that, if you don't feel sure on how to start any of those activities, to utilize SCORE, because they can be a great resource for that. And then lastly, the resources they'll need to move the innovation forward. So that's, how much money are you going to need to grow as a business, and where are you planning to tap into that? Are there key hires you need to make? Is there equipment you need? But really just kind of what are the things you're going to need to grow as a business, and how do you plan to kind of tap into those? So those are all things that I'd recommend kind of being prepared to speak to before speaking to somebody at MTI. So I mentioned that we're doing this self-assessment tool. You can find it on the business innovation funding page of our website. You'll see it looks like this. I took a screenshot right from the website, interactive assessment. And then if you click on it, it'll bring you to a series of questions. So for example, this is one of the categories, innovation and market validation. And you can see it asks a lot of the things I've touched on in today's presentation. So have you identified a significant problem? Is it new or substantially differentiated from competing alternatives? Do you have supporting evidence? Can you define your market size? And you can see in this example, I selected yes, yes, yes. And then for this last one, I selected no. I don't know how to define the market size. And so you'd keep going through this self-assessment, and then at the end, there's an opportunity to get an email from us where we basically tell you, okay, it doesn't look like you necessarily meet all the criteria because you selected no on if you cannot clearly define your target market size. And then we point you to a series of resources in the state of Maine, including SCORE, you can see here, and some other resources. And then again, we will provide you, even if you select no, we will give you the option to speak to somebody at MTI. So you're not being penalized for selecting no. It's a self-assessment that you use. It's not going to penalize you if you do select no, but it's a helpful tool to kind of understand what areas you might want to work on before reaching out to MTI. And that's all I got. How long did that take? 41 minutes, so slightly longer than normal. I added a few slides, but happy to take Q&A.
Yeah, some great new information to share. I think the self-evaluation tool will be really helpful, and I'll make sure to include that in my follow-up message as well for ease of access. Matthew, you got your hands up. Feel free to come off mute.
Yeah, I just have a question about equity investments. Can you talk a little bit more about how I guess common that is and what you kind of look for, especially maybe just toward like early stage technology companies, tech startups?
Yep, great question. Yeah, I kind of breezed over equity and loan. Typically, so MTI has an interesting approach to equity because we're simultaneously looking at it from the perspective of what I just described when it came to business innovation funding. So really being centered on the idea of economic impact potential and wanting to see a business that's positioned to grow here in the state of Maine. But we also look at it somewhat like a typical equity investor in the sense that we're looking to feel like there's an opportunity for us to get a return on our investment through a future fundraising round or eventually an exit. Typically, we're looking to, so they're not super common is the first answer. So I'd say we probably do anywhere from 10 to 15 equity investments a year as compared to, 500 plus grant awards. They tend to be companies that are commercialized, so they're already generating revenue. And the reason that tends to be the case is, we look at the opportunity, we look at the valuation, the term sheet, and one of the most powerful ways to demonstrate that you are a compelling investment is to have traction. If you can show that people are already buying what you're selling, that's a compelling way to demonstrate that there's an opportunity for MTI to get a return. We don't typically come in as a lead investor. In fact, we never come in as a lead investor. So the most common occurrence for MTI would be a company in Maine is engaged in a fundraising round. Let's say they're trying to raise $2 million. And they're seeking anywhere from $50,000 to $300,000 from MTI in equity funding to help them top off that round. And then the way it would work is you'd bring your term sheet. If it's a price round, you'd bring your valuation, or we do convertible notes as well to MTI and would send it before our equity review team, and they'd take a look at it and basically determine whether or not it seems like an appealing opportunity for us to participate in the round. But again, I would say typically we don't, with some very rare exceptions where companies can really demonstrate that there's a real opportunity despite being pre-revenue. I would say typically we're investing in commercialized companies, and the grant funding is really intended for companies that are pre-revenue is typically the approach we take. And the same generally goes for loan funding. So MTI does loans as well. Sometimes we have companies that we don't feel like the opportunity is great from an equity standpoint, so we don't agree with their valuation or aren't excited by their terms, but we do think that they have the opportunity to provide economic impact here in the state of Maine, and they meet some of our other criteria, and we feel confident they'd be able to repay a loan, so we point them towards loan funding. So yeah, that's kind of my high level overview on those two.
Thank you.
Great. We do have one from Sam asking, I've registered in California sometime back, but we're all 100% founder and all employees are in Maine. Would they be qualified for the MTI program, would you say, Tom?
Yeah. From a Maine-based presence standpoint, obviously there's all the other criteria I mentioned, but from Maine-based presence, if you're incorporated in California, not an issue. Again, you need to demonstrate when you speak to somebody at MTI that the employees are based here, that the founders are based here. And then also you need to register with the state of Maine, which again doesn't mean you have to change where you're incorporated or anything like that, or you shouldn't have to do anything with your California stuff. You just need to basically file paperwork with Maine saying, hey, I'm a business, I want to get in good standing. And there's kind of instructions how to do that on the state of Maine's Bureau of Corporations website.
Great. I know we touched on it a bit in the presentation, but Kimberly asks if you necessarily have to be a tech company to apply for a grant. As said, it's more about the innovation, but
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, our name, people think technology and they kind of instantly go to information technology, but, we work with aquaculture companies. I've personally worked with probably 5 to 6 different oyster companies, but they have an innovative technology in the sense of, they're doing something within oyster farming that's distinct and that gives them some sort of competitive advantage. So they're able to, either grow oysters with a higher rate of efficiency, so fewer of them die, or they can get them larger quicker, or they can produce them cheaper. And those are all things that give them an advantage. And so they're within our aquaculture space, or a manufacturing company. But you would need to fall within one of our 7 sectors that we're tasked with supporting, or your innovation. But we take a very inclusive look at what technology itself means, I would say.
yeah, absolutely. Not as much a question, but a comment earlier brought it up to me. Matthew says, "Who else is waiting for the government to reopen for grant apps? Is MTI affected by the government shutdown at all?"
No, yeah, another good question or comment. We are funded by the state of Maine, so there's been a lot of changes on a federal level lately with funding. We to date have not received really any of it. Certainly not our core funding. Does not come from the federal government. So we've received our funding from the state of Maine for the rest of through next summer. And we have been receiving funding consistently from the state of Maine for 20 years, regardless of the political disposition of the administration, Republican or Democrat. We've received a lot of bipartisan support. So that's just basically to say that our funding is historically it's been very secured, and we don't see anything in the immediate horizon that makes us think that our funding is anyway kind of imperiled.
Awesome. We have another one from Sam. Talking about loans. When it comes to loans, would you say the typical loan tenure and interest rate would be if assuming all the other parameters are met for the program?
Yeah. So first, assuming all the other parameters met is a key one, because our loans are actually quite compelling. But you need to demonstrate that A, meet all the core MTI requirements, and B, that your business is positioned to repay the loan. So the reason I say that is sometimes people come to us who have been rejected by a number of commercial banks. And sometimes MTI is able to support them with loan funding, even if you have been rejected by commercial banks, because we do have a higher risk tolerance. But we do want to feel confident they're going to be able to repay the loan. So typically, again, we're looking to see companies that are already generating cash flows and can demonstrate that they're going to be able to repay the loans. With that said, yeah, I think our loans are very enticing to people for a few reasons. So we have a 5% standard interest rate, which is lower than you can find at the moment, as far as I'm aware. We don't take personal guarantees, which means that you're not, the founders are not having to, put their house on the line or anything like that. We don't take collateral. And typically we don't require repayments to begin until the project that you propose to MTI is completed. So, MTI projects can last anywhere from a few weeks to typically a year and a half would be the kind of 18 months is typically the long duration of an MTI project. But, we're able to be flexible in terms of when repayments start. So, it can be a year and a half or even 2 years before repayments are expected to begin. And during that time, interest isn't accruing, so it's not growing. And then typically the repayment duration is generally 5 years. With the expectation that the loan is repaid over a 5-year duration. Again, we can be somewhat flexible in that. It's not a hard and fast. So occasionally we'll do 6 years. Sometimes people want to pay back the loan faster, so we'll do 4 years. Sometimes we'll have it be that the repayments start smaller and then gradually grow, and maybe there's even a big lump sum, a balloon payment at the end. So we try to be pretty flexible on the loans. But again, I do want to emphasize that you will need to demonstrate, you'll need to provide financials, you'll need to provide financial projections, and you'll need to demonstrate that you are positioned to repay the loan.
Great. Do we have any other questions? Sam does say thank you for that. Seeing a lot of thank yous in the chat. One from Danny, one from Robin, and one from Art as well.
Yeah, thank you, everyone.
Well, if we're wrapping up, I can read my spiel. If anyone has any other questions, I'll pause and we can address them. Otherwise, I do want to thank everyone for attending. As we mentioned earlier, we were recording, and we will be sending out the recording as well as today's slides once they're available. The recording will be hosted on our YouTube channel. That is our workshop library. We have dozens of free videos on there on a wide variety of topics. So if you need a podcast to get you through the rest of the day while still learning about running your business, check it out. On my follow-up message as well, there will be a survey that we really appreciate you filling out. We take your feedback seriously. And one more time, if you weren't familiar with us here at SCORE, we offer free confidential one-on-one mentoring and workshops, whether you're starting and growing in your business. It's easy to request a meeting with a mentor by visiting score.org, right where you signed up for this workshop. Click on Find a Mentor and fill out a brief online form. We're a nonprofit partner of the SBA with 240 chapters around the country, as well as right here in Maine. And we helped start over 560 businesses in the state of Maine alone last year. So you could be one of those if you next year, if you haven't started your business yet. We're here to help. I do want to thank Tom for a great presentation and MTI for their continued support of SCORE Maine. And we look forward to further presentations and further collaboration. Go ahead, Tom. Do you have anything else to close out today?
No, no. Just lastly, I have this link on our website. If you go on there, you can see all of our programs and set up a time to meet with myself or one of my colleagues. So yeah, just thank you all. It was really great.
Okay. Well, thanks to everyone. I hope everyone has a great rest of your day. Have a good one.